It's time to put some balance back into your life. Ian O'Neill here with Harry Powell. We're going to break down the latest UFC installment. That was UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Magomedov. Sean Strickland took on Abus Magomedov in the main event. Grant Dawson, Ismagulov in the co-main event, and lots of other things to discuss on what was an eventful, story-ridden card. Again, it delivered. Very, very enjoyable. Some good fights on it, some good finishes on it, and some good storylines coming off it. And me and Harry are here to break it all down for you over the course of the next hour or so. Welcome. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you like what you hear. Harry, good sir, we're in the midst of calendar day celebrations over here. I hope you had a good weekend. Anything crazy going on in your life before we get into this card?
There is never anything crazy going on in my life, sir. I've got my bottle of water next to me. The dog's doing whatever he's doing back there. It's the same as every other day. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, as am I. The card, what did you think of it overall? We know we were kind of watching it a little bit and texting throughout the card as well. Did you enjoy it overall? Like I said, I felt like it delivered. I think, we got some good fights. I actually thought that the card flew by, maybe because it was on like a little bit earlier, but we got to the Max Griffin and the Michael Morales fight, and I was like, holy shit, we only have like 3 fights to go. So yeah, it went by relatively quick. That's always the sign of a good card to me.
I really enjoyed the card. I think there's a ton of storylines coming out of it. I think one of the things I really enjoyed actually was there seemed to be in the last couple of weeks, or like the precedent that's been set is, we've gone through cards in the early prelims, and maybe it's been a little bit of a lower quality than it has been in other portions of the card. And we've sort of built throughout the card this level of quality, right? The ascension of quality as we go through the card. And that's pretty normal, right? In almost all other sort of combat sports. But especially in this one, you kick off the night with Alexander Romanov, Blagoy-Ivanov, and okay, the quality of that fight isn't exactly drastic, but both of those guys are guys that you know. You then roll into Luana Carolina. Well, we know who she is, and she was welcoming Ivana Petrovic, fine. Elvis Brener and Guram Kutatalaze, we definitely know who Guram is, and then Elvis Brener comes out here on his second or third UFC performance, and we'll talk about that fucking fight sooner rather than later. And then we roll right into Carol Rosa and Yana Santos, and we know those fighters too. We know their stories. We know who they are in the UFC. And so I think that some of the reason why it flew by is, one, we had some incredible performances. We'll talk about Elvis Brener in a moment. We had some good fights with Anderson Brito putting on a good performance. We had Luana Carolina looking good. And so I think when the prelims sort of offer you something a little bit extra than they usually do, there's always a certified banger on a prelim. There's always a candidate for fight of the night on a prelim, or generally. But when they offer just that touch more, I think it really aids in what our perception of the pacing is. But overall, I really, really enjoyed the card. There's some fantastic performances on it.
As did I. I really enjoyed it myself. And let's get kicking on it with the main event, because I'm going to stand up and admit here that I probably let my emotions get in the way of kind of how I felt that this fight was going to go, because I kind of fancied Abus Magomedov here, based off nothing but emotion, I don't think, to be honest, because I was disparaging maybe what Sean Strickland could do in the cage and how good of a fighter he is. He was kind of turned into this gatekeeper that has fought the likes of Pereira and other people as well. Obviously, Jared Cannonier in recent times. And Magomedov came in here based off a 19-second win in the UFC. Now, Magomedov is a good fighter, and I think he did show that at the early stages, but he also showed a massive gaping hole in his game, Harry, as well. And that was with his gas tank. And I think if you're to go really deep and analytical into this fight, like there's not too much to analyze here. I mean, Magomedov came out and started throwing that deep kick down the middle just to try and maybe disparage the gas tank of Sean Strickland, but throwing wild, throwing aggressive, and throwing a lot to miss in round one as well, ended up costing him his gas tank. And from a very early stage, I could kind of see what the the kind of overlay this fight was going to be in Magomedov loading up on all of his shots, where we've seen Sean Strickland just doing what he does, very kind of compacted, very composed, just trying to walk him down and land shots in the pocket, where he wasn't really exuding too much energy in there. And ultimately, the fight was ended in round 2 when Strickland he noticed along with everybody else that Magomedov was shot. His gas tank was done. And he went and just turned up the heat and got the fight done. And it was a good performance from Sean Strickland. What were your thoughts on maybe your performance, and did the kind of performance of Strickland surprise you? And then opposite, maybe did Magomedov's kind of failure kind of surprise you as well, and how he faded so quickly?
So in the preview show, essentially what I said was, I've just no idea what Magomedov is going to show us, because we just don't know, right? On the regional scene, as I said, he's beat some names we know, and that's fine. But coming in on your UFC debut and having a spectacular performance like he did, going out and just absolutely destroying his man in 19 seconds, highlight reel finish, whatever. I liked the matchup, but we said on the preview show, and this isn't me, tooting our horn or whatever, but what we said was, we're just going to find out. And that's why this matchup was great, because we are going to find out whether Magomedov is ready or not. On the preview show, we said, if he's not, Sean Strickland will beat him, because that's what Sean Strickland is. And as much as I thought it was an absolutely horrendous game plan by Magomedov, we have to give props to Sean Strickland for just, frankly, doing nothing but being a sensible fighter, right? Because that's what Sean Strickland was. He didn't do anything fancy. He didn't show new wrinkles in his game. He just came out and showed us why he is a top 10, top 5 middleweight in 2023, because he knew that there was 25 minutes here and he had to manage that pace, and he knew that if he didn't, he was going to get clipped. And he came out exactly as he should, at a pace he was comfortable with, and Magomedov didn't.
Yeah.
How is that?
That was it. Like, I mean, that, I think it kind of encapsulates the fight to a whole, really. It's like a guy who has plenty of experience in that slot in Sean Strickland, with a guy that doesn't have that much experience, who came out and just laid it out on the line early and thought maybe he was going to just try and go and run Sean Strickland over like he did with his first opponent in the UFC. And it simply doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that in the UFC. And I think Abus Magomedov, he found out the hard way there on Saturday night, big time. I'll let you continue, sir.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't mean to take away from Sean Strickland necessarily, but he really didn't have to do much, right? Yeah. Like, I just, when Sean Strickland fought Alex Bahia, a lot of the conversation, a lot of the rhetoric was around how poor Sean Strickland's game plan was. Well, I think the same rhetoric should be applied to Abus Magomedov here. This is your first main event slot against a guy who is known. It is known that Sean starts slow and builds into fights. It is known that Sean has a good gas tank and that he can take some punishment. He knows how to wrestle. He knows how to grapple. He knows how to strike. He has that Philly shell type compact covered up guard, and he uses it pretty well. And if you can't go out and run him over, you can't go out and push the pace, then he's going to come back and haunt you. And so for Abus Magomedov to put all of his eggs and his first main event in such a huge slot, all of his eggs into 3.5 minutes worth of fighting, is absolutely insane to me. Why not? Because we saw him keep the body. Looked fantastic in doing so. Tried to take the legs away. Looked fantastic in doing so. Did a bit of the grappling. Looked great in doing so. So why is it that we then had to dissuade from all of that impressive, poignant work, and just try and then throw the kitchen sink on top of him? I just don't understand that rationale.
It was that and his output as well. It was like everything was 100%. And you can't do that. I mean, the writing was on the wall early for me. I think we might have been, and even the commentary boot were saying it, they recognized it quite well. And like, you can even kind of get a sense of feeling more so when you're sitting cage side about how much venom is being thrown in some shots, and where it was like, you know, you used a great term, or maybe it was Spencer before, it was like a death by 1,000 cuts. And I think that's kind of what the game plan of Sean Strickland always is where he's just going to stay tagging you. He's going to get you stay moving back and, you know, committing to those shots as well. And, you know, I don't want to take too much away from Sean Strickland, but as well, it was pretty much handed to him with a bow here coming into the second round. It was like, he even said it in his post-fight press conference, Sean Strickland did. He was like, oh, he came out for round 2 and he was like, oh, we're done here already. I can't believe it. I better turn on the gas here. And I think that, you know, that's what Sean Strickland's game plan was going to be coming in here. But I don't think he might have expected to do that maybe till late round 3, round 4 or something like that. But yeah, like I said, you know, Abus came out and like there was method in his madness. I do agree with you there for sure. But I just the way he implied himself, and he just kind of maybe got sucked into the occasion a little bit where he wanted to go out there and get a finish, and you just can't do that. And that was the harsh lesson that you learn against, you know, top 10 competition inside the UFC, isn't it, Harry?
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad. Because I agree, Sean came out and it took him maybe 7 seconds to realize that Magomed had nothing left for him. And then you saw Sean's eyes just light up, like, and the confidence was there. And then he just started throwing. And Magomedov had absolutely nothing for him. The only critique of Sean's second round performance is that I would have liked to have seen just a touch more body work. I think that he could have got Magomedov out of there way, way, way sooner. But Magomedov was just so aware that Sean was headhunting. He just kept a really high guard. And okay, it didn't work, right? He was too gassed. He couldn't see shots coming. He didn't look for shots coming. Just got whacked in that second round. But if Sean had gone to the body just a touch more, the hands would have come down and the finish would have been way, way easier. But I was very, very impressed with Sean's willingness to just turn the gas on, to just have the confidence to be like, oh no, like this guy's actually fucked here. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to beat the fuck out of him. Because like you said, and I think we made this prediction on the preview show too, Sean Strickland's mentality going into this one, forget the vitriol, but from a pure fighting perspective, should have been, I'm just going to go out and put a beating on this dude because he doesn't deserve to be here with me. And this is a really nice, really easy show win bonus for me. So I'll go out. I know he might have some flashy teeps and stuff, but it's nothing I've never seen before. And I'm just going to put a beating on this dude. And like you say, I don't think he thought it was going to be that quick. I don't think he thought it was going to be that easy necessarily. But when he started pouring the gas on, he's a dangerous fighter, long-limbed, hits hard, and he's accurate when he throws. And so maybe there's a point there. And like, don't get me wrong, it's intelligent fighting from Sean Strickland to not be second round Sean Strickland all the time. Because I bet you Sean Strickland in the second round can't do that for 5 rounds. I'm not sure any fighter can. But if I'm Sean Strickland, I'd love to see him find somewhere in the middle, right? Because he was hitting Magomedov with some big power shots. And one of the things that we've struggled with in Strickland's career is that he struggles to get respect from guys with power, right? And they draw him on, and then he's got to be long and he's got to be creative and he's got to make it dirty. And that's how he wins and grinds his fighters down. I'd love to see him find just a middle ground where he lands a couple of shots that make guys go, oh, fucking hell. Okay, let me just take a little step back there. Because that range, that length is useful in that division. Really is.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your more thoughts on Sean Strickland's use of body work, because I feel that, you know, it wasn't as maybe, did you want him to go there maybe in round 1? Because I think at that stage where like Abus came out at round 2 and his hands were already down and his mouth was wide open. So I think he was there to be kind of knocked out at that stage. And I mean, I didn't think Sean Strickland did anything. Obviously, going in against a guy like that, you want to be maybe going to the body a little bit more. But I think Strickland's game plan was more so maybe putting him on the back foot, because we saw him very early in the fight, Abus Magomedov, when he was on the front foot, landing those teeps, landing those leg kicks, and, you know, he was looking dangerous. So I think Sean kind of upped the gears a little bit and wanting to move and close the distance and get Abus moving backwards. And then I'd be interested, maybe he would have introduced the body shots. But I think at the stage, early in the second round, it didn't take him that long to figure out that Abus had tired himself, obviously, and it was the takedown at the end of round 1 that, you know, Abus got him down, kind of got his back, but that seemed to have taxed him a fierce lot going into round 2. And then the writing was on the wall for me, because his arms were already starting to come down and his mouth was wide open, gasping for air. And I mean, that was what he basically turned away and ate the 1-2 and down he went. But where would you have liked maybe to see Sean Sheehan, I almost said Sean Strickland, to throw some more body work in that fight?
Yeah, so in round 2, when Magomedov had obviously gassed, his hands were down, but then the moment that Sean started piling on pressure, and it wasn't just a 1-2, when he'd backed him up just behind that black tram line, Magomedov's hands were pinned to his face, not necessarily intelligently and not necessarily with any great use, but the body was available and open. Now, Magomedov did a good job to last 4 minutes and change, but that would have been severely depleted if Sean had just gone back to the body, because this is a man, remember, this is a man that spent his gas tank. You know, the one thing he doesn't want to take is body shots.
100%.
So if you're in a situation where, and again, this is variety, there is every chance. Now, it didn't happen. It wasn't likely to happen. But if a fighter is aware that all Sean Strickland is going to do is walk forward and just land a ton of headshots, just shoot for headshots, if Magomedov had any energy left in him, well, you just time one of those shots and start to grapple. And okay, you may not finish it. You may not get Sean Strickland to the ground. You may not have a repeat of what you had in round 1, but variety is going to open up everything for us.
Question 2. Do you think that maybe it's some PTSD from him throwing body shots against Alex Ferreira, where he can leave himself a little bit open to left hooks and some shots to the face? And I mean, that's not a problem in this finish, because there was no threat of anything coming back. But I mean, the last time we did see him go to the body was against Ferreira, and you know, we all found out what happened there. He had a counter left hook and he got his lights turned out. So maybe there is that little bit of hesitation to go to the body from Sean Strickland. Is that reaching for the stars maybe a little bit?
I don't think so. I just think that in this fight, he knew he had his man hurt, and he knows that for Sean Strickland, when he puts the gas on, the gas is, I just want to knock the dude out, and the way I'm going to knock the dude, like, it feels, the finish itself is very Sean Strickland, right? Mm-hmm. It was very stubborn. It was very abrupt. It was very brutish, and it was very one-directional. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about fighting, is you get to see the character displayed in the artistry. And I think the finish was very, very Sean Strickland. And I would just have loved to have seen just a touch more flavor added, because in those moments, and you know, if you talk to any striking coach, you hit what's available, right? If a body shot is available, you take it. And if you hit somebody with a rib roaster, they're just as likely to go down as if you crack them right behind the ear, if you crack them right beyond the jaw, if you smash them in the nose. All of these positions, those rib roasters are just as dangerous, right? And with a guy that's just so exhausted in Magomedov, and I wanted to just touch on the back take, the mat return was great. The back take was horrendous. Sean Strickland was never in danger once. Magomedov tried to rush that back take like it was his last meal on death row. Like, he just could not put 2 and 2 together. And we'll talk about Grant Dawson and the amazing grappling of him shortly. But you look at the disparity between the two, and one is panic grappling and one is controlled chaos. And just really, I mean, as I've said, Sean Strickland looked great in round 2. One of the best Sean Strickland performed, one of the best rounds we've seen Sean Strickland put out in a long time. But Abus Magomedov had an absolutely horrendous performance in comparison.
Indeed. What next for Sean Strickland, Harry? Like, he's talking for a shot at the title and this and that, and I don't think so. I don't think so either. It's not what I would like to see. It's you want to be going up there against, I don't know, maybe someone like Paulo Costa or somebody like that. I think next you need one more there, just because, you know, not to disparage the win, but like I said, Magomedov was a little bit out of his depth there, and you know, we don't know these things until we see these things happening. So I think Sean Strickland, you know, he had a fair point. He spoke in his post-fight press conference about, paying his dues, and he is a guy that has paid his dues. You have to give him that. He's fought down a couple of times. He's a company man. And it'd be interesting to see what happens. I think, a lot is going to rest on what happens between Whitaker and Duplessis, but it's got to be probably one of those. So if it's not a title shot, Harry, what is it for Sean Strickland next?
So I have two names. I think this is kind of the problem at middleweight, right? Which is most of those top 6 guys are coming off losses. You don't want to do the Jared Cannonier fight immediately after. There's nothing really that I need to see in that, right? There's not a vast amount I need to see. Robert Whitaker has a fight booked. Marvin Vettori is the first option that I would offer because, okay, Vettori's coming off a loss, but those two haven't fought before, right? And so that's a new, interesting, something, both guys in the top 5, whatever. The other thing I will offer, and this is fighting down, it is, but what about Brendan Allen?
Yeah, I actually thought about that last night as well, and it's not a bad idea, but
he beat him in 2020, finished him in round 2. Let's run it back. The other option I have, which is a fresh name, this is fighting further down, but what about Caio Borralho?
Yeah, not bad either. Not bad either. I think, given all my thoughts on Sean Strickland, Sean Strickland, it'd be pretty unfair to have him fight down against once more. So I like that Vettori one for me, and it'd be interesting. The only thing, obviously, Vettori after that bad beatdown, he needs to stay out of the octagon for a little while too. So, I know Sean Strickland's strength of schedule, he likes to fight often as well. So very interesting to see. Look, obviously he wants the title shot. I don't think he's going to get it. Be interesting to see what the UFC decide on that for his next fight. But we shall move on, and we shall move over to Grant Dawson versus Damir Ismagulov. And Harry, I am going to give you the floor to discuss the performance from Grant Dawson and his excellent use of grappling jiu-jitsu, who he handled Damir Ismagulov very easily, and that's not an easy thing to do. You were massively impressed by Grant Dawson this weekend.
Listen, anyone that's listening or watching, please understand what we saw on Saturday night. Damir Ismagulov is an excellent fighter. Really, really, really good fighter. Grant Dawson on the ground absolutely blew me away. We knew he was good. We knew he was good on the ground. But we also knew that Damir Ismagulov was good on the ground. But the way in which Grant Dawson exposed, took, and controlled the back from an MMA grappling perspective was absolutely fantastic. Now, from a sport grappling perspective, there are things that you would ask him to do differently, right? There are things that you would ask him to do that were unnecessary in the MMA context, right? But this is nothing to do with sport grappling. And from an MMA grappling perspective, it was just a gorgeous display of what MMA grappling should be. So just as like an overarching look at the principles that he was adhering to, he was getting outstruck in round 2, and so immediately took the fight down. In round 1, there was one mat return and a back take. In round 2, there was one mat return and a back take. In round 3, guess what, boys? One mat return and a back take. So already, and this was always my gripe with the Merab Dvalishvili records and the Khabib Nurmagomedov records, well, they've had this many takedowns in a... Why do we need more than one? Surely, as a grappler, your aim is to take the fight down once and never allow it to happen again. Because you shouldn't need that, right? If this was... and it's not, but if this was this unregulated, no holds barred, fight to the death type thing, do you want 15 takedowns or do you want one? You want one, right? Like, that's the answer. You want one. And Grant Dawson just did such a phenomenal job of controlling Damir Ismagulov. One. So the control was the first aspect that was most impressive to me. The second was switching between attacking chokes and then forcing belly down back mount with strikes. So in rounds 1 specifically and rounds 2, less in round 3, Dawson would look for a choke, and he was looking for a choke that's been made quite common in modern meta grappling, which is he searches for the neck but doesn't actually go for the neck at all. He drives his choking hand underneath the far armpit, and he like almost locks a rear naked choke grip around the arm and the neck. Because what it forces Demir to do is he can't defend with this top hand. He has to defend with the secondary hand. And so as he brings the secondary hand in, Grant Dawson can grab that hand, pop the hand off, and immediately slide in an actual choke. Because the neck is exposed. There's no threat of a real choke, right? The arm's in. It's very hard to get that amount of squeeze on it with the arm.
I've seen Gordon Ryan speak about that in his use of the guillotine as well, where it's that you are trapping that arm to stop the hand fighting, to get to peel the hand off. And like you're saying, obviously you're more in touch with that than what I am. You're saying that this is kind of a new introduction of kind of choke variation where you're having the grip, different kind of grips, or you're implementing it under your arm so you can stop that peel down effect for defense of the choke. Is that right?
Exactly. So they're keeping one arm. I don't know why I'm lifting my hand up for the audio users, but
Yeah.
Instead of just lacing underneath the neck, they're going across the top of the chest, almost under the chin if they can get it, and they'll go underneath the armpit. Then they'll wrap a rear naked choke with no intention to finish that choke. All they're doing is they're isolating an arm, because obviously that arm doesn't bend when it's hoisted up, doesn't bend enough to grab hands. So you have to use the other arm. Well, as you're using the other arm to strip the grips off, there's a moment. There's an available moment where this arm's still hoisted and the other arm is defending the choke. So you can slide your choking arm underneath the neck and try and use that to threaten. Now, Demir Ismagulov did a really good job of defending the actual chokes, tucked his chin well, turned his chin inside, did all of the things you'd expect from an experienced grappler. But the moment that the chokes weren't working, Dawson said, yeah, no problem. I'm just going to hoist your arms up above you, start to turn your belly down, and just punch you in the fucking face. And that is absolute perfection. Obviously, absolute perfection is getting finishes. That's fine, no problem. But Dawson just did such a good job of swaying between the two. If you want to stay chest to back with me, no problem. I'm going to try and choke you. The moment that those things aren't working, or the moment you try and offset your hips or offset your back, I'm just going to force you to start turning and punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. And so there's dilemmas in both areas. I thought Dawson's use of the body triangle, both the half body triangle and the full body triangle,
I was going to ask you about that.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. And the strength of that body triangle as well was on show. I think it was round 2 when he got his back standing and he locked it in, and Ismagulov was forced immediately down onto the canvas to take some pressure off, which just shows the strength. And I thought Laura Sanko did an excellent job in the boot in explaining the importance of the body triangle and where the kind of foot and the lock position needs to be, which is facing down on the mat to kind of, so that you can get the biggest squeeze there. Maybe would you like to break that down a little bit, just for the use of the body triangle? When you're in the body triangle, you're trying to have the foot facing the ceiling. When you're locking in the body triangle, your foot wants to be flat down facing the mat. That's in order to get an extra squeeze on it too. Ismagulov, I guess it was the battle between him getting up to the foot to the sky side so that he could spin out. Very difficult to spin out when, say, the knee is facing the ceiling and your foot is facing the canvas. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so there are sort of two metas when it comes to locking the body triangle, right? You can lock a body triangle with just a triangle variation and just squeeze your knees, right? Like that's one option. The other option is, as you're locking, you'll see guys tuck the locking leg underneath the hamstring of the fighter and start to straighten that locking leg, because it really starts to pull the shin in through the ribs, in through the lower stomach, and that's pretty uncomfortable as well. For Ismagulov, what he wants to be doing, at least the meta in sport grappling, is he wants to start to walk his bottom hip underneath the locking leg. And then eventually, when he feels like his bottom hip is adjacent underneath the leg, he's going to switch his hips, and that will take the locking leg off his top hip, and it will allow him to start pulling it up. and then he can start to actually work himself out of the leg entanglement. I think trying to spin out, especially in MMA, is very, very difficult when somebody like Grant Dawson has a body lock on you. And so we have seen it in MMA, and we do see it in MMA. But the problem in MMA is as you turn that hip, your head is starting to turn in towards your opponent, which means your face is available to be hit, right? So obviously you have to be very, very careful with what you're doing. But I can't speak highly enough about the grappling elements from Dawson. I think there are definitely some big, big questions about the striking. In round 2, he was getting lit the fuck up for about 40 seconds.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about before, and I think this again speaks to the strength of his grappling, he's now going to be well ranked in an absolute murderer's row division. And we're still seeing that his striking is nowhere near what it needs to be.
You know, I asked myself a question when I watch fighters is, can I see them improving to a level where they can become a champion in the division that they're in? You know, I try and assess based off like the level of competition that the champion is showing in the division, and sometimes it's very hard to tell, but you have some late bloomers. You know, I mean, I always go back to Arman Saryukin and the confidence in his game and how much it can grow. Whereas obviously he can implement improvements, but I'm glad that you brought that up, because I wanted to actually praise Grant Dawson first, and then I wanted to maybe come back to reality a little bit and saying that, is he too one-dimensional? Is that game plan going to work against the elite level guys in the lightweight division? And I don't think it is. I mean, I would agree that Grant Dawson is a fantastic fighter. I agree that Grant Dawson is going to cause a lot of problems in that division, but there's a next level that you have to get to when you get to the top 3 of the division, and even when you start challenging for the title. And, you know, without trying to take anything away from that performance, because there's not too many people who can do what he did against Ismagulov, you also have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, there is levels in this game as well, and you need to be very well-rounded in all senses of words in your game. And I did see those gaping holes in his stand-up, and I'm wondering what happens when he can take the fight down. What happens if he's not able to take somebody's back? And, you know, there's a very likelihood and a very strong chance that that's going to happen further down the line based off that performance, you know, where he's going to be ranked next and the names that he's put himself in around in the lightweight division right now. What would you feel about that assessment?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the harsh thing here is we have Father Time against us. And
100%. That's a big factor.
The difficulty here, he's 29, right? Which is still young. There's still plenty of fighting left to do. But the problem at 29, and especially where, as you've rightly said, where he's positioned himself in the division, is you don't have time now. Now we need to be at the peak, right? Now there's no, you know, if we were women's 115, let's say, and you've just broken into the top 15 and there's a couple of things to fix in your game, we got time. We got time. That's fine. There's 2 or 3 fights we can take where we can slowly start to climb up those rankings. If we're talking about men's middleweight, loads of time, right? You could get to the top 15 and just be able to grapple and have never thrown a punch in your life, and you'll probably be able to figure things out. At 155 pounds in the UFC, you have absolutely no time whatsoever. And if we just have a quick look at the fighters in and around him now, Rafael Fiziev, Mateusz Gamrot, Iron Mike Chandler, Arman Saryukin, Hornito Moicano, Benny Daggers, Justin Gaethje. Like, these are the names, right? If you don't bring, because one of those guys is going to be next, right?
Yeah.
One
I
of
liked his
those
call
guys.
out of Gamrot. I mean, we always talk about what's next. I kind of think we're in that conversation now already about what's next for Grant Dawson. And I liked the Gamrot because we were saying here, he might not be ready, but there's only one way to find out, Harry, and that's putting him in there against the likes of Gamrot. I liked that call out. He wanted him for maybe, I don't know, did he call him out for the Paris card or something like that? Or, I mean, it's a good solid matchup. Will Gamrot take it? It means he has to fight down a little. I don't know. Maybe he will. I'd be interested to see it. Did you like that call out? Or who would you like to see next for Grant Dawson?
Depends what you want to do with him.
Yeah.
if you want to go and give him a matchup that favors him, you do Beneil Dariush. Because Beneil is not a guy that has as rhythmic striking as Matois Gamrot. He will absolutely happily grapple, but he also is hittable himself, right? And so if I'm Grant Dawson, what we saw in the third round, right, from Grant Dawson, I think this is an interesting wrinkle in striking, is the striking came far easier to Dawson because Demir was so aware of the grappling. Well, that can happen to any fighter, but the likely fighters that it isn't going to happen to are Matois Gamrot and Benny Daggers, and obviously Charles Oliveira, right? But the question you have to ask is, do you want to build him to be as high a position and force him into some form of title contention? Or do you want to build him in a way that his skills come first? Because if his skills come first, give me the Gamrot fight. Absolutely give me the Gamrot fight. If you want to try to build him into some form of contender, Beneil Dariush is the fight.
I don't know. I struggle even to see him against Beneil Dariush being able to implement this style of game plan that he did against Ismagulov. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, that's what's next. It's going to be one or the other. It's going to be one or the other in around that lightweight division. Be very interesting. Before we finish up on this fight, one last question. You complimented Grant Dawson about his use of ground and pound whenever the submissions weren't work. Do you think that he was guilty of maybe letting that slide a little bit in round 3 and just settling for the position a little bit too much there? You had Herb Deem, calling for action, and I don't like it, but I understand it, to be honest, the way he'd called for action in round 3. But I think it was due to the fact of the lack of activity from Grant Dawson that we had seen in previous rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't have a problem with the call. It's simply because, we should be pushing for MMA to be as exciting as possible. We should be pushing for fighters to look for finishes. And whilst there are some times and some calls that I think are egregious and unnecessary, I do think that when you're in such a dominant position, I would like to see a fighter push a little bit harder for a finish. Now, not to a point where, you're doing a fucking Magomedov and you're entirely gassing yourself out in a round with absolutely nothing left. But this is the third round. You got a 10-8 in the first. You dominated him in the second. Let's just open up a little bit. Let's just open up a little bit. Now, maybe Grant Dawson was like, well, the first round striking didn't go great and I grappled. The second round striking went really bad and so I grappled. I'm just not going to let this guy up. And in the same vein, I see both sides. I absolutely see and support Herb's side, but I also support Grant Dawson's side, which is I'm coming in here to win. I don't need to finish this guy. I've come out and put out an absolutely fantastic performance so far. I'm not taking any risks because I know if I fuck up and I lose based on this, whatever mistake I've just made, not only does this 10, 15, whatever, 10, 13, 12, 11 minutes of fighting go to waste, I also get half my bonus. And so I'm not doing any of that shit.
That's very true. And what I asked the question, at what stage should we be expecting Ismagulov to be working a little bit harder to get out of that position as well? When you're threatening to take away a position, you're threatening, Grant Dawson there in that opinion. And I think, we were stuck in a stalemate there, but what was Ismagulov doing? What chances was he taking to get out of that position? Because it can work both ways here. Obviously he's in an opinion where he can't give away too much or else he's going to get caught in a choke. But I know it's a tough one. I mean, I'm not going to go to war about it or anything like that. I just thought it was very, very interesting. And, it could be a story that we could have or a conversation that we could have another day. But we shall move on. And we'll move on to Michael Morales versus Max Griffin. And I feel that, we're talking about growth and time to grow. And Grant Dawson he doesn't have the same luxury as that of Michael Morales, who does have plenty of time to grow in the welterweight division at 24 years of age. Showed some really good signs here of development. Also showed some level of greenness as well, which you would expect from a 24-year-old. But this is why this matchup, Harry, was the perfect matchup for Michael Morales, because we can see some of the positive sides of his game. We can see some of the negative sides of his game, and we can get an understanding of where exactly he is at as a fighter right now in the welterweight division. Where do you think that he is at based off the performance against Max Griffin, a man who he beat by unanimous decision on Saturday night?
He needs to stay here. I think that Max Griffin did exactly what he needed to do. He made it gritty. He made it uncomfortable. He asked some questions of Michael Morales that he hadn't been asked before. I wrote in my notes that this was exactly what Max Griffin needed to do in the first couple of rounds, right? Especially in the first round, where he just hit Michael Morales where Michael Morales was expecting breaks. You know, in the same way that every veteran does, you're breaking from a clinch and from an awkward angle. You don't expect to be clipped. You just expect a reset. And Max Griffin would just clip him with something, or he would just hit him with something, or the leg kick would come at a weird angle, or the timing was a bit off, or he would time Michael Morales doing stupid backhand Superman punches and would just crack him. Like, all the silly stuff that was coming, all the superfluous, all the fat in Michael Morales' game was being punished. And then when Morales did the right things, he was way better than Griffin. And we saw that. In the second round, dropped him a couple of times. Third round, dropped him a couple of times and just beat him all over the place a little bit. I agree completely with you that we saw some of the beauty of the Morales game. We saw some of the times when he was able to use his range effectively, which is what I spoke about on the preview show. But we also saw Michael Morales rush. We saw him pick the wrong shots at the wrong times. We saw him leave himself on the center line a little bit too much at times. We saw him fall in love with his ego a little bit too much. Like, he was flexing a few times when he hadn't done nothing to flex.
Yeah, very, very strange. Very strange, yeah.
But I think, where am I? I'm very excited about Michael Morales.
Me too.
Because at 24, you look at him going in against a Max Griffin, who's a good fighter, who's a solid fighter, a good test. Adam Fujic, good test. And Morales is going out and finding ways to win. And that, more than anything, is the thing that excites me the most, is that you go out, you're making mistakes in these fights. It's not flawless performances. It's not clean performances, but you're still finding a way to win. I like that in a fighter.
Oh, I do too. And I think that Max Griffin played his part excellently as well, because that's what we had said on the preview show, that, you know, he's not going to win a standing tit for tat battle with a guy like Michael Morales, who's just way longer with the reach advantage and also very quick as well. So, you know, Max Griffin went in there and he didn't make it easy for Morales. So Morales had to find a way. And I believe, Max Griffin may have even took round one, I believe, on the scorecards, on some scorecards, maybe. I'm not too sure. I'd have to go back and check, but he definitely didn't make it easy in the early stages. But what were some of the highlights that you've seen from Michael Morales? What really made you go, wow, this guy has something in this fight?
I really liked, and this is a small thing, maybe even a superfluous thing, but I really, really like it, is when you have a guy with the range of Michael Morales. And I know I'm fucking so biased for fighters with a little bit of range on them, but one thing that I really loved about Morales is he closes distance and he can cover distance extremely quickly. And the one thing I loved in this fight is when he was thinking about things, he would throw a jab into space. Max Griffin would then back up just a touch, not sure what was coming next. And immediately Morales would leap in with another 1-2. Sometimes he'd finish it with a leg kick. Sometimes there was a body shot on the end of it. Sometimes there was a body kick at the end of it. But that ability to cover distance and use the jab as not only something to cover the vision of Max Griffin, so he's not quite sure what's coming and where, but to set up the ability to cover the distance really, really fast was excellent. I really liked, even though placement sometimes in the wrong position, his willingness to throw jumping knees. Because in the same vein, if you throw an uppercut, sometimes you're leaving yourself on the center line. Sometimes you're leaving yourself open for takedowns. With a flying knee, okay, you're definitely leaving yourself up for takedowns if it lands wrongly or the opponent reads it. But having that ability to be explosive, to be athletic, and to offer something slightly different in really close-up scenarios, I think is really, really interesting. I really like it in certain situations when Max Griffin was hurt up against the cage and Michael Morales just chucks it on in there just to see what happens, right? I like that a lot. I really liked some of the takedown work in round 3. It showed that it's there. It showed that it's prominent in his game. And even if he's doing it against a fighter that's depleted and a fighter that's hurt, I don't care. Like, the takedown itself looked great. Some of the control looked good. I thought the clinch reversals was great. He knew he made mistakes. He worked for his underhooks. He worked diligently with his head position, made sure that when he got his positions right, he was covering the hips, turned well, exit out of the clinch safely enough. Just the overall parts of his game that are good are really, really good. And when he sits down on his shots and he moves his head a little bit, he's got serious power in those hands. And so we have an absolute prospect on our hands. There's just the stuff that I don't like is the just odd willingness to take shots for no reason, the jumping Superman punches for absolutely no reason. Sometimes he allows his footwork to just go out the window and he just walks guys down rather than cuts the cage off. It's those things that I'm sure will come with maturity and experience, but it's those types of things that worry me as he climbs this division.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the way you talked about his jab too, and especially with his reach. If he can get that jab a little bit more educated, I think a big misconception about the use of the jab is that if you throw it, it has to land. It doesn't have to land. It's just there as a distraction. If it lands, it's all well and good. You're getting that jab out there. I mean, you're causing some difficulties. You're getting your opponent thinking that a jab doesn't have to land. And that's why a jab is so underutilized and underappreciated in mixed martial arts right now. And we've seen some good jabbers in our time as well. But if Michael Morales, with his reach advantage, can get that jab fired, that's going to open up a hell of a lot more for him as well. You also said that you don't want him to be moved too far, and I believe so too. I think that performance showed us he's a great fighter. He's lots of potential. He's got a big ceiling, but we don't need to throw him to the wolves yet. We don't need to fucking put him in there against anybody serious. Who would you like to see him next against?
I got 3 options.
Go for it.
First option is D-Rod, Mr. Daniel Rodriguez. The second option is Nicholas Dalby. And I think that's a tough fight because Nicholas Dalby is well put together. He can do all of the things. He can also fight long. He's got a gas tank and he can do a bit of the wrestling.
Yeah.
And the third one is Phil Rowe.
I like all those 3 options. I think they're all viable options and smart options in the development of him. That's what it's about right now, I think, at this stage for Michael Morales is developing him in the right way, because we've got potential there for a special fighter, but we can't be throwing him to the wolves too early, because if he takes a bad beatdown, that might take some confidence away. It might take some of his health away as well, which you don't want to see either. And his willingness to get hit, he's going to have to get a little bit better. Maybe that's the naivety of him as an early fighter who can take these shots, but you don't want to be taking those shots. You're better off not getting hit at all. As we move on to the next fight, and that is Ariane Lipski versus Melissa Gatto in the 125-pound division. Ariane Lipski proved here that, it wasn't just a flash in the pan against JJ Aldrich for me. She came in here against a difficult kind of stylistic matchup. Gatto looked stronger. She looked bigger than her. But Ariane Lipski proved that, she does belong in 125 division. We said that's so important for her to kind of get a win like this, to prove that she can go on a streak, because I think we're starting to truly see her full potential now and what she can do inside the UFC. Took her a little while to get going, but it was an impressive performance from the Brazilian on Saturday night.
Yeah, tough fight, close fight, really enjoyable fight. And I was impressed by Lipski's willingness and ability to make adjustments. Gatto was the longer fighter, and so I was impressed with how Lipski pulled some shots from Gatto in order to then counter. Some of the hip tosses was great. I mean, that's, Ariane Lipski on a bit of a pedestal, but some of the hip tosses great. I'd have liked a little bit more ground control. I'd have liked a little bit more damage on the bottom, but overall, just a good use of footwork, a good use of head movement, a good use of timing, and just a really, really good performance from Ariane Lipski. Like, it was a very close fight. It was a tough fought fight. I know I said that earlier, but it really was. There was a lot of conversation about it online for judging and whatever. Watching it live, I thought it was tough. Watching it again today, I still found it tough to score. But yeah, really, really enjoyable fight between two women. Really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. What next for Lipski? We just move her slowly up. Do we give her a challenge, maybe a chance to move into the top 15, or maybe a chance to be on the pedestal of moving into the top 15, perhaps? What would you like to see next?
Miranda Maverick.
Boom. Great show. Great show. Great show. I like it. I like it. We shall move on. We need to we're up on 50 minutes. We need to start rattling through these. We set out the banger alert alarm for Benoit Saint Denis and Ismail Bonfim. But you know what? Benoit Saint Denis took the batteries out of that alarm. He didn't want anything to do with a banger this time. You said it in the preview show and you spoke very well and you called this to a T. You said if Benoit Saint Denis is smart enough, he's going to look to utilize his grappling here and put Ismail Bonfim on his back. And after a little bit of a scare in early round one, he was kind of forced in doing just that. But it was a smart move in the larger picture, and a very good performance from Benoit Saint Denis, who got the submission in round one of 4:48 by rear naked choke. Talk to me about his performance, Harry.
Fantastic. Very, very smart. Very, very, very smart. I thought going in, I wasn't impressed by Bonfim, and we'll get to him. I had high hopes for Bonfim, and what we saw was that he's a fighter that does not know how to be a nail. He does not know how to reverse those positions. He is very, very, very used to being the hammer. And against Benoit Saint Denis, you have to be able to do both. You just have to. And so Benoit Saint Denis came out, took a couple of shots, landed a couple of shots. The actual takedown itself was Bonfim had landed, I think it was a right hand or a left hook, one of the two. And Benoit Saint Denis was on big wobbly legs and was hurting and fell into the takedown and managed to get Bonfim down. And then from then on, it was just curtains. Bonfim had very little idea of what was going on the ground. Benoit Saint Denis passed almost immediately into a mount. And then we were just finished, like absolutely finished. Really, really not good stuff from Ismail Bonfim. But what we saw from Benoit Saint Denis was he took him down. And when he got him down, he understood immediately that the levels were not the same. And so just ran through him. Fantastic. No problem. Great stuff.
Brilliant. Yeah. And as you mentioned, Ismail Bonfim, yeah, I think the way you described it, likes being the hammer, doesn't like being the nail. That was pretty much on show, and he got massively exposed for his grappling as well in that fight. So yeah, I had high hopes too. I was excited to see how he was going to do against Benoit Saint Denis. I've been keeping an eye on Saint Denis ever since his UAE Warrior days. He was pretty good, and moving down to lightweight, I think has suited him better. He's had a couple of fights there now. Obviously came in, we spoke about the bad beatdown he got against Lipski dos Santos at welterweight on Fight Island. Has really turned the corner there. To recognize you're better than a fighter is good, but to recognize that you're better and then to go and to use your killer instinct to get that fighter out of there shows the kind of an extra level in your game as well. And that's what I was impressed about with Benoit Saint Denis. I was equally disappointed with Ismail Bonfim for, folding a little bit too easily as well. He got found out a big time there. What would you like to see for both of these guys? I mean, are we totally writing Ismail Bonfim off at this stage? And Benoit Saint Denis, he was reaching for the stars. He called out for Gamrot. I actually said that Grant Dawson did. I think he called for Gamrot in Paris, and I don't think that's going to happen either. What would you like to see next for both of these guys?
So Benoit Saint Denis, I've got two names. First name is one I just really want to see, and that's Thiago Moises. Give me that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful fight. Yeah.
The fight that would just be absolute insanity would be Benoit Saint Denis versus Elvis Brener. Timelines match up.
Yes, now we're talking. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I love that one. And the timelines do match up quite well. Really looking forward to talking about Brener in a little bit. But Bonfim, what next? We just put him back in there.
Just relax.
With anybody, yeah. Just cool the jets for a little bit on Ismail Bonfim.
Absolutely.
And yeah, but we definitely won't be cooling the jets under Sultan Ruzibov, who went out there and absolutely destroyed Bruno Ferreira very early in his fight. This was a massively impressive UFC debut, wasn't it, Harry?
I mean, what can we say? Like 6'5", 185 pounds. Fucking hell, lads. We've got a little something on our hands, I think. I think we might have just a little something on our fucking hands. get this guy back in there next week if we can. He is going to be something for sure. Get him in there and let's see him. I am 1,000,000% ready to watch this guy again. No problem.
Yeah, it's kind of just come in like a whirlwind into it. And if you're going to go out there and perform on your UFC debut, you know, we've seen what happened with Abus Magomedov in the middleweight division. He came in and cleaned house after 19 seconds and was given that Sean Strickland opportunity. I mean, you couldn't think that similar thing is going to happen here with Ruzibov as well. You know, when you're coming out here and cleaning house fairly easily. Look at Bruno Ferreira was undefeated coming into the fight. He was a prospect that a lot of people were talking about, but you know, Ruzibov is like, yeah, to hell with your undefeated record. That is gone now, sir. Do you kind of catapult Ruzibov after a performance like that into a kind of a top 15 fight?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he's 29, so middleweight, he's a baby, right? Still loads of fucking time. And with Magomedov, it's one of those where it's a fuck it and find out. Well, we kind of found out, right? And I think for Ruzibov, don't get me wrong, maybe this is me being biased because we've just seen the Magomedov, but let's just give him one more, you know? Like, he's gone in, he's taken no damage whatsoever. Really quick turnaround is possible. We could see him next month, the next 2 months, right? No problem. What's the rush, right? Let's just see him in there against a one more, and then obviously let's give him a competition step up. No problem. I got absolutely no problem with that. Let's see that, but let's not shoot him to the fucking moon immediately, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I can't argue too much with that either. You know, maybe that's that recency bias. Go on, go ahead.
Armand Petrosian, thanks.
Oh yeah, there you go. Lovely, love it. Moving on to the next one. We were worried about Kevin Lee here, Harry. We were really worried about Kevin Lee, and that, you know, you went as far as to say that UFC were punishing Kevin Lee by putting him in this matchup. And you know what? You were dead right. I mean, the shadow of his former self inside the octagon got clipped early. Fakhretdinov pounced on that, went on to get the finish via submission by guillotine choke. And I mean, not surprised that Fakhretdinov had that in his locker. Thought Kevin Lee might have been a little bit more durable in this fight, but nonetheless, he kind of buckled. And I mean, yeah, what do you think? What's your overall assessment of this? I mean, Kevin Lee is just like not the same fighter anymore. He was kind of looked like maybe he was brought in there to build Fakhretdinov's name. And I think that's basically what I took out of this fight.
Yeah, horrendous stuff from Kevin Lee. I mean, horrendous in that he just can't take a shot anymore. You know, like, he didn't look super comfortable in there, really. He looked nervous. He hasn't fought in a while. So, you know, I totally understand. There's ring rust, there's this, there's that. I get it. But man, that's just a different level of destruction, you know, like a different level of destruction. I'm not sure he even had the cerebral capacity to tap, let alone, you know, he was rocked to the bottom of his shoes. And then Fakhretdinov was like, by the way, you're asleep. See you later. Thanks for the cheese. We send this guy to the moon now. He's 31. Put him in. Just let's see it. This is one that we just have to fuck it and find out. I don't know. I have a couple of the names, right? But we just put him in there and let's just see what happens. Because I was talking to Spencer offline and he said, what about Jack Della Maddalena on short notice? I don't mind that fight. Maddalena has said that he wants to do a catch weight, happy to do a catch weight. So, you know, I don't want to see Fakhretdinov or Della Maddalena cut weight if they don't have to. If we can do this at 185, let's do it at 185.
But Jack Della Maddalena has been matched up this afternoon with a UFC debutant. So that fight is, I wouldn't have minded that at all. I mean, it would have been... Yes, someone, oh gosh, I saw it earlier on. It's a friend of Matt Brown or something like that. I'll get his name in just a moment, but yeah, I did not want Jack Della Maddalena not competing on the next card. I'm glad UFC figured out something, but I think, yeah, he has been matched up as recording. This was on Sunday afternoon that it came out. So I like the idea of Fakhretdinov stepping in. So, I mean, if he's not going to get it at 290, stay ready, man. You keep there, and you never know what might open up over the coming cards as well. Or maybe we could just get him matched up and put him on a card down the line in about a month or two as well.
I mean, the other options are, if you want to go at just a touch of a step up, you give him Randy Brown, similar timeline.
Yep.
If you don't, and you want to go a step up above that and maybe pick out a name, let's see Santiago Ponzinibbio. Put him in there. Let's see.
Yeah. And the guy that Jack Della Maddalena is fighting is Josiah Harrell. That's quite the debut that you have to face off against Jack Della Maddalena. We'll talk about that on the preview show, obviously, a little bit later on this week. And we shall move on, good sir, to the next one, and that is Johanderson Brito versus Weston Wilson, and plenty of cannon fodder here for Shawnee Sheehan with the opinion of jiu-jitsu doesn't work in MMA. A couple of questionable decisions here by Weston Wilson, which found him getting grounded and pounded out in the second round by Johanderson Brito, who put on a very good performance overall in the featherweight division. Very impressive, but like I said, it was we spoke about it a little bit at the start here, Harry. Some questionable decisions to go for leg locks and to concentrate on those kind of techniques when you're leaving yourself massively exposed for shots. Not the greatest game plan here for you for Weston Wilson, but we can't take too much away from Johanderson Brito, who performed well in the fight overall.
Yeah, I mean, Johanderson Brito is one of those guys where when you enter the UFC, there's a couple of fire hydrants that you're going to meet who hit really, really hard and are stocky and are durable and are just really tricky matchups. They're not guys that, you're going to see win titles. I don't think we're going to see Johanderson Brito win a title. I don't think we're going to see Johanderson Brito in the top 5 of a division, but he's just one of those really tricky customers that if you're not a very good fighter, you're going to lose to. Because he hits hard, he's willing to get hit, and he can do a bit of everything. But if you're not a good fighter, this happens, right? And what happened to Weston Wilson is he didn't manage to get respect early. He wasn't able to use his footwork. He wasn't able to make Johanderson Brito miss. He wasn't able to punish Johanderson Brito for the big wild swings. And so when he was hurt and when he was covering, he goes for an outside heel hook. And look, Brito just looked at him like he'd never seen a heel hook, didn't know what it was, and wasn't bothered about the pain in his knee.
Yeah.
And then he transitions after taking a couple of shots to a knee bar. Now, the knee bar is safer, and it's safer because it's far harder for your opposition to roll out of a knee bar, but the knee placement wasn't in the right spot. It wasn't in line with Weston Wilson's hips. And okay, I understand Weston Wilson had taken a ton of shots, and so he's probably not cognizant of exactly where the knee line is, but use those positions to create some space and get up, right? Because there was a moment where Johanderson Brito was looking at his leg like, am I going to need to tap to this?
Yeah.
What am I? Is it? And then he started to gain hamstring exposure. And the moment, what I mean by hamstring exposure, I should explain that. That's one of the I speak about this in my class on Friday morning all the time. Hamstring exposure is essentially when you're in leg lock battles, if you can see your opponent's hamstring and you can connect either your foot or your hand to it, it's giving you a method out. Because if your opponent is showing you their hamstring, it means they are not efficient in their own leg placements.
Where do you want your leg placement to be in counteract to that?
So if you are in attacking a knee bar, you would ideally you want your hamstrings on your opponent's butt. Yeah. Ideally, then they can't see them at all. Right? They are literally underneath them, and you have the knee bar and you're bridging through the knee bar in such a variety that it's very, very difficult for you to leg fight. You're going to need to hand fight first. If you're in heel hooks, equally, you want to show them the side of your thigh rather than the underneath of your hamstring.
And that's why we see a lot of fighters when they're looking to try to escape those positions, they're pushing off out of the inside of the hamstring as well, which
100%.
it stopped when you're pushing on that side of the hamstring. It doesn't allow the attacker to kind of turn his leg the way he would want it to finish off that as well. So it's
Absolutely.
kind of doubly productive in trying to escape a heel hook or a knee bar or something like that.
Absolutely. And so when you Anderson Brito connected his foot to Weston Wilson's hamstring, what Weston Wilson should have been doing is collecting up that leg and readjusting his own position. But obviously, he's dazed and confused, like Led Zeppelin might say. And then he starts taking some shots, and boy, oh boy, does he take some shots. And you Anderson Brito just fucking wails on him, and then we're just done. And look, Charles the Bronx will argue, but attacking leg locks, unless you're Charles the Bronx, and we must talk about Charles the Bronx's leg lock game, because it's something that he uses to open up other things. He doesn't commit fully to leg attacks. He uses them as a method to either open up sweeps, to open up guard transitions, or to open up attacking other submissions. And I think in MMA, that's very, very, very smart. But committing to leg attacks in MMA, I think, is absolutely insane. And Weston Wilson found out why.
Exactly. You just look at that example from last Saturday night, and that's all the reasoning that you need with that. We're out here making Led Zeppelin references. We're moving on to the women's 145-pound division, and I'm glad you're doing that because I don't really want to spend too much time. This is a relatively poor fight in a pretty much non-existent division. Rosa got the split decision win, and that's about as much as we have to say about that. I mean, we don't know what's happening in the women's 145-pound division, and it'll be interesting to see. We shall stop and talk about Elvis Brener and Guram Kutatalaze. My goodness gracious me, this was an epic encounter. This had so many twists and turns, so many just what we thought. Guram Kutatalaze was well on top here. Elvis Brener came back so tremendously well. I mean, oh my God. I mean, I'm almost stuck for words because I can't even describe how nuts that this fight was. You know, Elvis Brener showed that he is good at being the hammer and he is good at being the nail as well. And I mean, that's what we were looking for when we were talking about who were we talking about earlier on about being the hammer and the nail? But anyway, Ismail Bonfim. Yeah. And I mean, durability, Shawnee, yourself, we talk about durability in this game, and if you're durable, it's going to play you a lot of dividends, and we've seen that here, like an absolutely like Grand Canyon like cut open up on the forehead, but nothing was going to stop Elvis Brener, and he just showed tremendous heart, tremendous grit, and what an unbelievable performance against a really good guy in Guram as well. Like, this guy is no joke. We haven't seen him too much, and he showed how good he was in this fight as well. But nonetheless, it wasn't to be for Guram Kutatalaze, and it was Elvis Brener's night. Unbelievable performance, Harry.
I don't have many words. Mate. Just, it was vintage Guram Kutatalaze for the first 5 minutes. Vintage Guram Kutatalaze. There were moments in that first round that I expected the referee to stop the fight. Not necessarily because of blood or because of the cut or whatever, but because Elvis Brener was just getting battered. Absolutely battered. Dropped a number of times. The over-the-top elbows from Guram Kutatalaze were absolutely savage. The body kicks were savage. The straight shots were incredible. Just an out-and-out fantastic first round for him. Comes out in the second, and Elvis Brener is just like, oh, I'm still here, by the way. If that's okay with you, I'm still here and I'm still doing the fighting things. And you could see that Guram wasn't necessarily struggling with it, but I think was just questioning how the fuck he was still there. And then slowly, Brener starts beating the body, starts finding the timing. He starts to win the grappling exchanges, starts to put Guram on his back a little bit, starts to turn the momentum, starts to turn the tide. The third round comes in, and you're thinking, like, how the fuck are both of these fellas still going? They've poured everything out. How's Elvis Brener? Elvis Brener looked like Davison Figueiredo without having dyed his hair. Right?
Yeah, I know. It's always the guys who have the brightly kind of colored hair that always gets the cut. My earliest memory is Elvis Sinasek. Remember, that happened to him before. He used to always get cut. Used to always go back into his bleach blonde hair, and yeah, it was no different here. It was like a bloodbath in there at the best of times. But I mean, Elvis Brener picked up I mean, he ticked off a lot of boxes in this fight. You know, willingness to win, heart, finding a way. You know, coming back and countering Kutatalaze's game with just pure pressure and impact on his strikes, and he just broke him down and really took the heart and the want for Gurm Kutataladze in there. It was just a war of attrition in there, and Elvis Brener shone through right at the very end and just overwhelmed Kutataladze with punches and body shots, and it was a wonderful finish and a wonderful performance. It was unreal, Harry. Like, and I mean, you know, will we go as far as to say as we got one in the lightweight division? He's definitely going to cause a lot of problems there too. Look at Kutataladze let that slip away with him in certain regards, you know, and another night the fight could have been stopped, but nonetheless, it was a good decision. The fight kept going and Elvis Brener shone through. He's not going to get away with that with better fighters, like, or more elite level fighters in the division. But my goodness, if he goes out there and performs like he performed on Saturday night, like, we're in for a show each and every time he goes out there.
Yeah, I mean, what you want to do, and it's funny, it doesn't shock me that he's a Charles de Bronx student, right?
No, not at all.
It really doesn't shock me. And in the same vein that Charles de Bronx has had this sort of evolution where he's managed to find that sweet spot in his own style, I think Brener's going to need to do something similar if he wants to make a statement in this division, because having the heart, having the toughness, having the durability is absolutely fantastic, but you don't want to show it too often. And so we're going to need to see him clean up some of the striking in the very early goings. We're going to need to see him rely a little bit more on what's clearly some fantastic grappling and just start to pull everything together. He's only 25 years of age, going to be 26 in a couple of months there. And I don't mind the UFC just taking it kind of slow with him. Let's give him some matchups where maybe against some grapplers, maybe against some guys that will engage him in that realm and maybe keep him away from the damage a little bit, and maybe allow him to actually utilize his striking a little bit more in a live setting and just slowly bring him on. Like, do we have something? I have no idea. You go out against Zubaira Tukhugov and you win a split decision. That tells me absolutely nothing, really, right? Because Zubaira is one of those fighters that makes every other fighter look the same level as he is.
Yeah.
The win against Guram in the way that he did it was unbelievable because, as you say, it's ticked off all these boxes we want to know about fighters. The next fight he has, I think we'll be able to have a better understanding, because you go from Zubaira then into this absolute madness, potentially a once in a career type fight where you come back from the brinks of stoppages to turn it all around and in a war of attrition manage to put somebody of the level of Guram Kutataladze out of there. And so the future is very, very, very interesting for him. I have a couple of names.
Please, sir. Please, sir.
I wouldn't mind Claudio Puelles.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a guy who will happily grapple, right?
Yeah.
Happily grapple. We could go with Joe Selecki.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Or if we want to end the hype train, do Paddy Pimblett.
Well, yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. That's definitely not going to happen. I don't think. Yeah, that would be
though, right.
Yeah, 100%. No, I don't think the UFC are ready to do that just yet. I think, especially Paddy coming back off an injury. But I mean, he stays winning, Elvis Brener stays winning. You never know what may happen. Just a thought for Gurm Kutataladze, Harry. You know, struggled to find competition over recent years. You think maybe the performance may have played into that, or the fact that may have played into his performance that he hasn't been regularly active in this fight, or do you just think it was just one of those things where he just met an absolute beast on the night?
Yeah, I just think that And I'd love to speak to Goram, actually. I'd love to ask him the question of what goes through your mind halfway through that second round when this fella, you can see his brain beating and he's just not going anywhere. Like, what does that do to you as a human? I just think Goram hit him with absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. And he just found a way to come through it. And I don't think Goram punched himself out unintelligently. I just think he put absolutely everything into the fight, and your man just managed to outlast him. And I don't think that's necessarily a negative against Goram. I just think it's a massive positive for Elvis Brener.
For sure.
I'm still super happy, super ready to see Goram Kutatalaze back in there. I don't know if he wants to take a little bit of time off because that was a grueling,
very tough fight,
fight that he was just in. But if he wants to jump back in, I have a name, and it's Drew Dober.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy. Would you really give him Drew Dober? That 100%. Seems like a fight that Elvis Brener you couldn't even put into after a win like that, maybe.
So for me, I think the ceiling for Elvis Brener is higher than the ceiling of Goram Kutatalaze.
Okay, fair.
And so for me, the Drew Dober test for Elvis Brener might come after the next one. Elvis Brener is only 25. Let's just see. Let's just give him the Goram Kutatalaze fight is a really, really tough assignment for your third UFC outing. Let's just pump the brakes a tiny bit. Like, let's just see. You asked, do we have something? Drew Dober's not the man you put him with to find out if we have something.
Yeah, for sure.
We put him with a guy that's maybe 1, 2, or 3 rungs below. And then you say, go on, go and show me the things. Go and do the things. And then we'll talk. Let's say we do Joe Selecki. If he goes out and runs through Joe Selecki in a round or two, okay, sure. Chuck him in with a Drew Dober. Chuck him in with that level of fight. Chuck him in with a Bobby Green. Chuck him in with, one of these types of fighters. Fine. But let's just relax for now. Let's do one more, and then we can talk about the big step up.
Makes sense. Last 2 fights we're really going to touch on. Luana Carolina ended the undefeated streak for Ivana Petrovic in the second to last fight on this card. Alexander Romanov and Blagoy Ivanovic fought on the card opener. Not a great fight. Romanov picked up his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt after pretty much jabbing the face off of Blagoy Ivanovic, or Ivanov, in the heavyweight opener of the fight. I always find it strange when coaches do that. It's very strange, but that will round us up for another UFC APEX card, 76th installment of a UFC event in Las Vegas. Crazy that we've gotten that far after this amount of time. Harry, we're recording this a little bit earlier this week. Your Severe Spotlight has not been at this time, hasn't been out. As you guys are listening to this, you can catch that over on SevereMMA.com. Who is it this week?
Elvis Brener.
We just spoke about him. Go over there and read Harry's detailed breakdown of his performance on SevereMMA.com. Thank you, everybody, for listening again. Always a pleasure coming on here to break down these fights with Harry Powell. We'll be back for UFC 290, an absolutely monster card that I cannot wait to break down in just a couple of days. At the same time, the same place. Thank you all for listening in. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow Harry at BJJ_Harry Powell and me at IO'Neil MMA, and we'll catch you the next time.